This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1135, Creator Spotlight on Sal Buscema, take 2.
Ain't no stopping them shenanigans. Love getting into shenanigans. All up in them shenanigans. 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 Shenanigans.
Welcome to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. I'm your host, Adam Chapman. This is episode 1135. It's Creator Spotlight on Sal Buscema, part 2. As we're doing another deep dive into, well, no, it's a shallow dive into Sal Buscema's work at Marvel Comics over the many years. Here we're talking about 3 particular books, but before we talk about what those books are, Nathan Struck, you are joining me once again for this slow paddle into a little bit of Sal Buscema's work. So, just in general, what did you think of these 3 books compared to the last 3?
You know, it's just a quick aside, being called shallow, not the worst thing I've been called. What I think of these 3, I really, really like the third one, if we talk chronologically. I thought it was quite fantastic, and the other 2 were interesting. I don't know, it's a mixed bag for me. It progressively gets better and better for me. Although I have continued to monitor Sal's, especially his work with faces. I find that to be a particular interest. I already knew he was a good storyteller, a bit abstract, sometimes low on detail, but faces, he seems really drawn to facial features and facial expressions, particularly these screams, pain, anger, which was that kind of horror connection that we talked about last time. So that seems to continue this through line, and I feel like I have developed a continued greater appreciation for the artist. But yeah, for me, it'll be a progression. So if you don't like what I have to say about his work at the beginning of our book conversation, I hope that you'll maybe enjoy the end. That's my thought. Okay.
So let's dive right in, because we've done a little bit of the backstory on our previous episode where we had talked about Sal. So we're going to start in, August 1974 with Captain America and the Falcon. Technically, that was the name in the issue, I believe, at the time. So it's Captain America and the Falcon 176. I kind of told you off podcast yesterday, it's the issue after a climactic event, which reverberates for many years throughout the Captain America mythos. But I feel like in a lot of ways, this is the more impactful issue, because like the previous issue, one panel is really what the Secret Empire boils down to when it is assumed that he finds out that the president is actually the head of the Secret Empire. And so this issue is the dramatic emotional fallout. And it's interesting, I did not mean to do this. This paired with the Hulk book we're going to talk about were both books that were very focused on flashback and really kind of recapping events up until this point from using different storytelling means to do it, but the same idea. So it's interesting, I did not mean to do that when I picked out these 2 particular books. But this one, again, this is Captain America struggling with, can Captain America exist, or can he... The Captain America I thought I was, this ideal, can it exist knowing what I know about the world, is essentially what it boils down to. And a lot of people in his life try to kind of tell him to snap out of it. You're Cap, it's okay. But it's an interesting, kind of stroll through his career up into this point. And so as someone who hasn't necessarily read a lot of these Captain America comics, I actually find it really interesting and enjoyable, because I don't know a lot of this backstory at this point. Cap is an interesting character that I'm aware of a lot of things, but not the smaller details. So something like this, which really progressed through his career, was really interesting. The choices that Sal makes it's fascinating to see him figuring out how to draw the story in a very weird time at Marvel. Like, Iron Man's got a nose. You got some weird stuff going on there. But it's very archetypal. You can tell he really likes drawing Cap. A lot of the shadows he puts on Cap, you will see later on when he's inking some of his own stuff during Maximum Carnage, when Cap first shows up, like the same type of build he's kind of developing for Cap in terms of how it looks. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this particular issue of Captain America.
I mentioned maybe rather glibly clip show, and while not necessarily, it's not really doing panel for panel retellings of maybe scenes that have previously been told in Captain America comics. It is a wide swath. It is going through like many of the highlights and certainly inspired, right? You see different ways that Sal, which I find more interesting, perhaps inspired by artists along the way. You get very clearly, where is a page number? I don't know, 2, 3, 4, I think, when he's strapped down for the experimental table about to be bombarded by Vita rays, or do you say Vita rays?
I say Vita rays.
Depends if you're British or American, I suppose. And even that table design, not to mention, of course, the machines around him, but it's just those little kind of fiddly bits, almost, Rube Goldberg, right? Very Rube Goldbergian, I would say, Kirby's drawn to. And so you can see some of those Kirby influences, including even the page before, some of that classic chiseled chin, kind of square-jawed Kirby-esque moments. And then as it transitions into this 2-page spread, white background that says, but so much has happened since then. It's giving, like, for me, I'm kind of feeling Storenko, right? These moments, especially in that classic issue where you see, like, the death of Bucky, and he's kind of, this desiccated, zombified face as he keeps dying, and that kind of horrifying element. So it's kind of fun to see Sal, I guess, react to some of the comics that he, or the artists that he thinks are cool. So that I liked. The actual retelling of the stories, not so much. And for the most part, it is just like different Avengers barging into his room. Well, the Falcon barges right in. Like Thor stands there voluminously, a shadow in the doorway. Like you said, nosy Iron Man. And they're all just like, snap out of it, Cap. And, it is also noteworthy that there's not a ton here about the president themselves, right? Like, a lot of this is like, I don't think I've done enough. I'd have a big enough impact. Which I guess in one way I'm kind of grateful for. Like, I would feel very unsympathetic, feeling like he'd be overly naive for Cap to think that, first of all, it's in the Constitution of the United States. There's nothing in the Constitution that says, we the people, we're going to elect our leaders, that those leaders will be perfect and that they will be beyond reproach, and that people are always going to choose the best possible candidate. Like, that doesn't seem, even up to this point, certainly in American history, it's just plenty of problematic presidents, many of whom were openly white supremacists. So, like, it'd be weird for me to think Cap going like, oh my gosh, some sort of secret conspiratorial problematic corruption in the government, the highest levels of the government, just seems really, really quaint. So in a way, I'm glad it's not just an entire issue of him going on about that. But another way, it just feels like he's kind of having a big sook, feeling really, really sorry for himself. And I don't know. I'm coming off of the thing that we talk about often, where we've read the thing in the future that is referencing these things, which for me is Avengers Forever. And I feel like the Cap journey in Avengers Forever was better done and more meaningful, and just kind of, that's kind of where I'm last situated with these moments of Cap feeling like I can't go on. And so for me, this really just felt like a clip show. Yeah, like an opportunity for him to go through and celebrate his history, while getting yelled at by most of his friends. So yeah, and a nice smoochie from Sharon. But I didn't really feel the pathos. I didn't really feel connected to Cap. I didn't really understand his journey. It felt more like he was being pushed along by the plot rather than being character driven. Interesting.
I thought it was interesting because we don't often get to think about Captain America as a soldier in World War II who did kill people. Like, I think more modern comics lean into that more, that it did happen. But here, like, he even has a moment on, I guess, what page... we're looking at the digital versions on page 9, where he's like, I guess I've learned a lot since the days I reveled in my enemies' deaths.
That was an interesting moment.
Right? It's just... And it makes sense for someone who is so gung-ho to be part of the war that he might have that feeling. But I think we... whitewash is maybe not quite the correct term, but I think we whitewash our idea of what Captain America is, and I think that's what the character's dealing with, right? Like, he's supposed to be like this perfect noble guy who's representing the dream, but like, he's like, I stole something, I did it to save my name. What does that make me? I used to, revel that I killed people in a war. Like, I like that aspect of Cap we never see. Like, really grappling with that aspect, and I thought that was interesting because we see him generally so much further along in his journey, where this feels a lot more fresh, and more like him trying to understand what his place in the world is, what he's supposed to be. And it's interesting reading it from our context, because when this was published, this is only 30 years after World War II, but like now it's like 80 years after World War II. Like, it feels even more pronounced that if you read it with that lens, like, he would feel even more like, well, aren't I supposed to be the dream? And then how does he reckon with not always being perfect? Now, I did love that Steranko moment that you mentioned, the white background and having those images. I thought that was great. Even the page where he gets the Vita rays, and you have that shot where he's being bombarded, and it's that kind of body horror that you were talking about in the previous episode. That he didn't have to go that hard, and it does channel Kirby and Steranko when he does that, but it's a really kind of horrific moment. You don't see the rest of his body anymore. You just see his head. You just see kind of the pain, and you have the energy emanating off. It's a really evocative image, and not one we usually think of with the Vita rays, right? We usually think of it just being more of a celebratory moment of this guy becoming, better, not better, but bigger and stronger than he was, and more the physical specimen he wished he was. And this makes it more horrific and makes it more oh, this is painful. This is difficult, which is not normally the journey we go on with him.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really like that almost disembodiment, the loss of self, loss of his body, his eyes. You can't even see his eyes at a certain point, and the crackling energy is painful as he screams, "I was born." Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a nice kind of horrifying moment. And then again, even the drawing that you mentioned, the reference to the nose on Iron Man in the digital version, page 9. There's just something unholy, inhuman, uncanny valley. I like that kind of. There's a man behind there. You can see the actual human part, but you're reminded of everything that it's hiding in this kind of man in the iron mask moment. It's almost more Doom-like. I mean, of course, it's Doom-like because of the nose piece, and so I like that. I like that kind of. It just feels like that's another good Sal moment of these facial choices, facial features. Something is off. He's very good at drawing a face of screaming of horror, just kind of feeling off. Again, page in the digital version 12, first panel, really good shot of a mask. Again, these very human eyes, and then the inhuman mask itself, just perturbing. And there's a shot of MODOK in the panel following. I would love to see him do more MODOK, and he's a face horror guy. I would love to see more Sal with the man who's all face. Garish, kind of ghastly Kirby face would be fun.
So I think a couple issues before this, you do see that.
Well, I gotta take a look. We said a few issues, or is the issue previous?
Actually, you know what I'm thinking of? I think it's Cap, but now that I'm thinking about it, it actually might have been the Hulk issue that we read. It might have been a couple issues before that MODOK shows up. It's one of the two, but he does do MODOK.
Yeah, it seems like that would be a nice fit.
We haven't really mentioned it at all, but I really like the cover. It's a classic cover. It's definitely one that's been used and parodied a lot. There's just something about the way Steve looks, which I don't know. I just really like that image. Also, it's an interesting choice with the deep V shirt. I don't know what's going on there, but I really like it. It's interesting because it's such a busy cover and nothing to do with Sal. The fact that you have the icons of both Cap and Falcon on it, you have Cap America and the Falcon. It already takes up so much real estate, so he has a lot less room to play with. But it does make the overall image look more impactful because it's technically bigger. Not bigger, but that's all you're looking at in terms of the art, so it seems bigger, even though it's actually much less space.
It also feels like, we were talking the other day about some enjoying Ron Friend's hairy arms, hairy-chested men, Hercules and so on. Feels like with that wide V, Cap needs a little bit of chest hair. It seems like Sal could have maybe, in a way that doesn't make any sense, be inspired by the future tense Ron Friends and or the Cooper brothers who love to do a hairy chest. I think Joe was doing hair, right? So maybe that would have been nice to see. And I also like it on the Hulk. I like later on when you see the Hulk getting hair. And Deodato does that. And I know it's not popular for a lot of people, but we're going to get to Hulk soon. And I have some opinions on the way he renders the Hulk. Again, a better artist than I'll ever be. I'm not saying he's bad in any regards. Sometimes I have aesthetic preferences. That's all.
The one of the last things I want to talk about this one is that even that first page of Cap kind of screaming to heavens, "Captain America must die." I really like the shading on the top half of his costume. It's an interesting choice to kind of make him more in shadow. I mean, he's also literally on a spotlight here, which does kind of emphasizes his own feelings of loss and feeling lost. But I really like that, and I didn't mention before, but this issue was written by Steve Englehart, who is a legendary writer, especially when it comes to Cap. Sal Buscema obviously was the artist, and Vinny Coletta was on inks, so I did forget to mention that before. So that was Captain America, 176. You ready to jump ahead, I think it's 10 years?
Yes, I am.
So I picked this one because I liked the cover. I thought the cover was arresting, and I was like, oh, if I was flipping through the racks, or if I was in a dollar bin and I was flipping through Incredible Hulk, I would definitely be like, whoa, what is going on here? Now, what's interesting, so this is Incredible Hulk 291. It is Assistant Editor's Month, so it does have the stamp for Beware, it's Assistant Editor's Month, which typically led to hijinks. So often they would have funny issues or funny stories, not always. Sometimes they were played straight, but sometimes there were some silly stories, and they all blamed it on all the editors being at San Diego Comic-Con, and so the assistant editors were running the books, and this is what you get. That was the idea, or at least the visual premise. So you do have the stamp here to delineate that. This is a Hulk I've never seen before, with the Hulk with the long hair like this. Like when we get in the first... There's basically two stories here. We have kind of in the foreground, or the framing sequence, you have Hulk visiting Ann Nocenti, who I guess at this point was an assistant editor on the book. Bill Mantlo is supposed to not be there, and neither is, I guess... Actually, it's interesting because the book says Ann Nocenti editor and then Jim Shooter chief, but I guess in the dialogue they talk about Carl Potts being the editor, so I guess Carl Potts is the real editor of this book. But yeah, it's a very weird tale with the Hulk not knowing what to do about something, so he visits Marvel Comics of all places because they're his official biographers, which in universe I guess is canon. And then we kind of flip to a Thaddeus Ross story, which I thought was actually a lot more interesting. The framing sequence didn't really add a lot to it, but what were your thoughts? This is Bill Mantlo writing the Hulk.
Well, it occurs to me that I may have made a mistake in what I found or downloaded in the Marvel app. So I have Incredible Hulk 281.
Oh.
Which is the wrong issue. So I've got to pull up the right one.
Oh, no.
So... sorry to put like a fly in the ointment, but like I could kind of maybe try to discover this as we go.
I mean, if we're talking about art, I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting, the idea of art in comics is that can you tell the story effectively without the words, or at least do as much of the heavy lifting as you can. Right. So I guess we're about to find out if that works. So you read 281. What happened in 281?
So 281, there's, again, I was like hoping to talk about the cover, which is not actually by Sal Buscema, but it was like arresting. And there's this whole journey of like Banner in space, and like great horror moments that I was like all excited to talk about. And but like Banner and this Omnivac is like, attacking, and you've got, the humanoids, like again, this kind of non-human face but human body humanoids. Like there's a lot of like just kind of horror stuff going on there, and then there's the leader, and I don't know, it's like weird and kooky and crazy aliens, and there is the long-haired Hulk. But there's just I don't know, some really weird moments of what I would call like pseudo horror. So it's like a space kind of adventure with the leader and all that stuff. So instead, I'm going, what was the issue I'm going to... Well,
you know what? Let's talk about it then, because I'm flipping through it. I'm like, in some ways, this is probably more representative of Hulk by Sal Buscema, to be perfectly fair. The one that 291 is a bit more of a clip show, like you mentioned. It's a bit of a clip show in the history of Thaddeus Ross, and he's about to be, he's basically done something that is treasonous, and now he's having to deal with and grapple with that. But the issue you're describing, as I flip through it, is much more action oriented. Big crazy, action in space. You got the leader. So this is much more like when I think of Sal Buscema on the Hulk, this is what I think of. Did you enjoy this?
I didn't enjoy the story so much as I did enjoy moments of horror and zaniness and like weirdness. That was the part I was drawn to. The Hulk himself, like you mentioned, like long hair. I'm not used to that. Like in the way that it's drawn here by Sal. I don't know. I want to be open-minded. I don't love the tiny little kind of like, I don't know, underwear is the best way to say it, or Speedo kind of like thing for the Hulk. But like that's just maybe my being like having a preference for the pants, and that's what I grew up with, and that's what I've seen. Mm-hmm. And it is very much, I don't know, it's just kind of the 70s moment, right? With like shaggier hair, and then like, I don't know, something about him being more like in a spandex kind of thing, right? There's that kind of like, maybe that was the movement towards something more superhero-y by having that, whereas like the pants themselves are usually tattered, and there's some like kind of like folds and so forth. Maybe even harder to draw. But I'm going back, I'm looking at 291, And there's a lot I like here too, though. Like the conversation with the Sentient in the office, and the way that the Hulk is drawn, all haggard and is like almost like a gumshoe. Mm-hmm. So this is something that, in its own right, is kind of. I'm not just talking extemporaneously as I look through it. It's got its own vibe, but yeah, it's not as it's not his own story, right? Like 281 is. So I'll go back to 281. I just wanted to see some of the stuff you were talking about for 291. Let's go here.
Again, a lot of it is focused on Thunderbolt Ross and kind of his history as a military leader. And to be honest, I'm not sure how much of it we ever knew. It's interesting because I'm reading this, and I've recently read the Red Hulk series that was just running through One World Under Doom. And that was a really fascinating series about, he's an old grizzled soldier. He's got to escape from Doom's dungeons. And it was a lot about him kind of still being a boots on the ground type of guy, even when he can't be the Hulk. And that he's not just the Hulk, and he's also got his brain. And so I thought this was a really interesting perspective to kind of look at, well, what creates this guy who ends up being so focused on stopping the Hulk? And, what kind of military guy is this? This guy who becomes, this general, but also is very much like a boots on the ground type of guy, kind of relishes being in the fight, and what that was like. And you see him killing people. You see him, storming in the Pacific Rim. Like, you see all this stuff, which, again, I don't think I've ever really experienced or read before. So I thought, for me, it was really interesting to see that.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a really introspective story on a character that I think of as, kind of the centerpiece of the villain of the army, right? We always know the army's always coming after the Hulk. And obviously that's usually personified by Ross. So I thought it was really interesting to kind of see more about him as a character. And now, at this point, Hulk has been pardoned. And what does he do about that? Because he still wants to stop the Hulk. Just because he's gotten a presidential pardon doesn't change the fact of how he feels about the Hulk. And then him grappling with this and almost deciding to take his own life, but then deciding he can't do that. But his next toughest war is to figure out, if he's ever going to have another fight as a soldier because he's been so disgraced. So it's introspective. It's not what you read. You read a big, over-the-top slobber knocker, whereas this was something very different.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a dark moment at the end, like you're mentioning. Interestingly juxtaposed with like weird silliness, like the digital version, page 17, that's a splash page of this absolutely ridiculous, almost how do I say this? Wylian? Dr. Wily, very Wily-esque, like from a Mega Man game, almost like Gamma or something from Mega Man 3. It's just like absolutely preposterous and silly. I think Paul would really get a kick out of seeing this image.
That's funny.
But then like the following page 18 in the digital version, some great horror stuff. Like there's, it feels that there's like almost some Richard Corbett, right? Or I guess maybe the other way around, that maybe Corbett may have been drawing on a little bit of Sal at times, because I think he would be great on like Hellboy. It'd be really some fun he could have done working with, and maybe there is that horror out there that I'm not familiar with to be seen. But yeah, the ending is quite sobering and dark with Ross and the thoughts of self-harm. So yeah, definitely. I think the story looks more substantial and more interesting here than what I saw. Than what I read in 281. But the actual kinetic kind of crazy, almost very 70s, right? That fun romp was there. So interesting to see more about Sal's time on the Hulk.
Well, it's interesting just within one character and one book, you can see how different both the stories can be, but also the art has to kind of meet that story in a different way. So like 291, as you said, like it's tighter panels, it's more character work, because it's not being able to rely on, big punches from, the Hulk and some gamma irradiated characters. Whereas 281 looks like it's a lot more fun, but maybe doesn't have the same substance. So it's interesting, 10 issues apart, and you're seeing him being able to do a lot of different things with his art.
It was his range, yeah.
Now, here's a good question. Actually, I didn't ask this before. I have Cap, but I usually do. When you read the Cap America issue, did it make you want to read the next issue?
No.
Okay. With 281 of Hulk, did it make you want to read the next issue of the Hulk?
No, not really. I would be happy to flip through more of Sal's stuff. It didn't make me want to read another issue. But 291, Again, having not been read it yet, but flipping through it and then listening and kind of just scanning some of the panels, that might be 291 might compel me.
It's interesting because there is a bit of a ramp up. I decided against it because I really like the cover of 291, but 300 is where they kind of go back to Hulk being savage. And it's for many years it was considered like the one of the big fights where you have Hulk against like the Marvel Universe. But I was more arrested by this cover and the fact that I had never read 291 before, so that's kind of what prompted me to choose this particular issue.
Yeah, good. I mean, like, we got a 2-for-1.
We did, accidentally. Now I have to read 281, you got to read 291.
All right.
It's good homework. We'll talk about it off pod. That brings us to our last particular issue today. So we're going to jump 8 years again, or 8 more years, I should say, into the future, into June 1992. Now, this is Spectacular Spider-Man 189. Now, some backstory. There is a tremendous storyline called The Child Within, which was JMD's first issue of Spectacular Spider-Man that he wrote during his, at this point, it ends up becoming a long association with Sal Buscema. He kind of brings back the Harry Osborn as Green Goblin. Harry Osborn had worn the costume a couple times. He wore it during Inferno to fight the Hobgoblin. He wore it briefly, I think somewhere else. I forget which storyline, but in Web of Spider-Man, he tried being a heroic goblin for a minute, and then he decided to better against it. But this is, under JMD, he really kind of has a psychotic break. He sees his father everywhere, and his father's encouraging him to become the Goblin again and to fight Spider-Man. So that leads into a big thing that happened that year is that every series of Spider-Man, they all had 30th anniversary specials, and they all had a hologram cover, and they all had kind of different web patterns and designs on them. So we're reading issue 189 of Spectacular Spider-Man, which is written by J.M. DeMatteis, and it's got artwork by Sal Buscema, and interestingly enough and important, he also does the ink, so he's inking himself. So this is it's interesting because I've always, obviously, anyone who's listened to the show knows that I don't love Sinkovich on Sal's pencils, but this is pure Sal. This is him doing pencils and inks for an oversized issue, and he delivers it all. So I'm curious, first, had you read this issue prior to sitting down to talk about it?
No, this is a first for me. This is not an era of Spider-Man that I have a lot of familiarity with. I'm aware of the broad strokes and Normie and all that stuff, but no, I haven't read any. So this is a new one for me. Also interesting to see like this giant-sized 30th anniversary on a 189, right? Like it's not the right number, as it were. It's the right timing, as you're describing, but the numbering, it seems like, well, just one more issue would at least be 190. Like, you're so close to 200. Like, that seems like that'd be a bigger deal. Like, no, because the other book is doing its own thing, right? So you kind of go along with it.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I'm impressed that they didn't make it like a 4-part, going through all the anniversary issues. You'd almost would expect that these days. If they're going to celebrate a big anniversary, that each title would have an anniversary book and then they would all link up. But instead, they were all stayed their own lane. But again, that wouldn't last long because they were only 12 issues away from Maximum Carnage. So, big stuff is about to happen. And Maximum Carnage itself, the first month at least, if you look at the timeline, is only a year and a half before the Clone Saga. So this is only 2.5 years before we're going to get Ben Reilly. So you can start to see, Spider-Man's becoming a darker character. Like, the themes here are very different from the 70s. You're dealing with mental illness. You're dealing with obsession. You're dealing with a lot of, really creepy gaslighting of Harry to his wife, and trying to, get her to go along with things, and making it super uncomfortable, and, using his son as, a psychological warfare. It's interesting they got it through the Comics Code Authority, because it's not scary enough to be too much, but it's still a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, whenever you have a child this age, I guess, right, it really ramps things up. But to your point earlier, the way that Peter is, the tone around him, right, the way that he's depicted or framed, the very first page, worried and angry, somber, overly somber. He seems quite angry. He's the furrowed brow, downturned mouth. He's not curious. He's not cautious. He's mad, and then doesn't speak to MJ, and then just kind of almost ignoring her, starts turning the Jack in the Box. And that's a lot of his face throughout. You keep going, and you keep kind of going from page to page, and he's either continuing to frown or grimacing or clenching his teeth. There's no happy-go-lucky. There's no moments of like, oh, I'm so glad you're here, MJ. That idea of Peter being already very dark, you can absolutely see it visually without reading a word.
And even that when he opens the jacket in the box, like that's, they play it well. Like it's the full page splash. Like it looks creepy. It's the whole idea of gotcha, right? Remember when we read Pursuit, and it was all about him going after the chameleon and finally finding who sent him. And it wasn't the same thing. Wasn't it just Harry on a screen just saying gotcha? Like this starts that running theme of what that means.
Yeah. But this, as great as Bagley is, this is quite its own being, its own creature. Forgive it if this is a pun unintentionally, because his goblin is outstanding. Like this is the most exposure I've had to Sal's goblin, and I guess I can see why people, at least in part in terms of like the art, are so drawn to this story. Right, this is a classic, important storyline, and I'm hard pressed to think of like a better goblin artist right now. Like I can't think of anyone all throughout, and it's not. And either when Harry's got his mask off or mask on, he can make Harry look goblin-y, and then he can make the goblin look either excessively impossibly garish, and he can bring humanity to the goblin mask, which is like the best of both worlds. Like everything is like haunting and sinister, and the extra kind of wide, extra deep, rounded white eyes. That's that classic look with a ton of pinpoint pupils from one moment, and then thick black lines, almost mascara-like around them as they kind of seem sunken in. Like this is almost the equivalent of the challenge that Farland and others take up, and certainly Bagley does quite a bit of work with, and then Joe Bennett in particular, trying to evoke emotions in Spider-Man's featureless mask, and the squinting of the eyes and the widening of the eyes. This is like the equivalent of the Goblin, that a mask that ostensibly could emote already and had no problem. Or Romita Senior did a great job with it. It's not just a human mask. Sal's doing something really cool here with the power of abstraction to just make everything feel extra wrong or off or really exaggerated. It's like page after page of haunting and haunting and haunting. If the question you're going to ask is, does this make you want to read more? I want to read all of this. Well,
good. You should. I have an omnibus that says, "Hey, you want to experience this?"
Well, what I really want is for an epic collection or series of epic collections that I can have in my hot little hands instead of an omnibus. But your generosity is noted and voluminous. Again, I'm sorry about the puns.
That's all right. The storytelling by Sal, like the page where Normie brings in the pumpkin and it slowly emits the gas and they all kind of pass out. Like that's tremendous storytelling. Like you can feel that moment, even like in the page before when you can't see it yet. When you just have Liz saying like, sweetheart, where did you get that? Like you can even the letterer is doing such a great job of heightening that moment. Like it's not just, you can tell the tension of that, and you can see it in her face, and then you have the page flip, I should say, and then you just have this great panel where there's very little talking. It's really just in the first panel, and then it's mostly just everyone slowly suffocating to this gas, and then the goblin just showing up and saying "gotcha." Like it's terrifying.
Yeah, and the variety of panel work, right? Like, this is the kind of thing that I don't think it's Alan Moore. I think it's is it Scott McCloud? I think it's Scott. In Understanding Comics, where one of the invitations is, this is the kind of thing you don't do in prose, or you're not really trained to, or there's usually not a point. And you can't do it in film because film controls time for you. It hides its secrets, and then it reveals it, and then it moves on. Unless you want to be somewhat obnoxious and pause the film and kind of go back and forth, it really is something that happens to you. You don't have this kind of control like you do in comics. And you don't have the visuals you have the visuals that you don't have in prose, and so you're supposed to take it. One of the invitations is to take in each page. That each page has its own character, each page has its own rhythm, and you can kind of scan and take it in, and then go back to the panel by panel and play in between the gutters and all this other stuff. And so, the panel variety, sometimes with the classic page for ideal storytelling, right? For efficiency storytelling, it's supposed to be 9 panels, right? And so that's the classic approach, and of course that's why Watchmen is done in so many 9-panel pages. But Sal is not doing, and I don't want to be critical of Adam Kubert. I love Adam Kubert and others who do this kind of stuff. Adam has done lots of work playing around with different kind of panel arrangements. You know what? I don't even think it's fair to say this is Adam. Let's go after maybe Deodato or something like that. Sometimes, and this is really also in the Image era, slashes across the page, making panels almost unintelligible, unidentifiable, hard to find. And there's a kineticness to it. There's a frenziness to it. It's creative. But sometimes, again, especially in the mid-'90s, early '90s period, the movement away from classic storytelling, maybe in favor of extreme, right? The extreme panel work, loss of gutters. You can see that Sal is a classically trained talent. And so he goes from 12 panels then to a gigantic splash, right? Which is kind of like, that's an extra surprise. He said it was small, little pacing panels you have to go through, and then it's like 8, and then it's like 9, and then it's it's 7. Like, he's doing lots of storytelling. He's being very reserved. He is playing around with like offset panels and inset, and in terms of like proximity. Sometimes there's no an open panel, and it's kind of seeping into the gutters. But he's very controlled. And it felt like he wasn't a good artist before, but there is this interesting, right, this intersectionality of he really seems to be at his prime in so many ways, in the way that he's reserved and in the way that he goes and lets the pencils go nuts. So, just even his panel work is very noticeable. And just to swipe through this and appreciate the variety. Nothing is the same as any other page. Everything is different and unique and special and makes you go, oh, why this? So I thought that was also very noteworthy.
It's interesting because I believe, I'd have to do the math on it, but I think he was like 66 years old doing this. Like he's,
wow.
You know what I mean? Like, and he's not that far off from retiring from like regular pencil work. Like it's, by the end of the 90s, he's done, we've already seen it because we've kind of looked at some of his final work, which would have been kind of mid 90s. And then he switches to being an inker primarily, and then obviously doing commissions and stuff. So this is like one of his last sustained runs on a book. He's already into his 60s at this point, which is kind of mind-boggling if you think about it. Like, he was around so long, and he just recently passed away at just under 100, like literally days away from being 100. Like, yeah, he was not a young guy, and he's doing so many cool things here. Like, he never stopped learning, never stopped getting better, and like, this is some of his best stuff. The storytelling's so strong. Now, it helps that he has an amazing writer. He's got a great creative team behind him in terms of the colorist is great here. The letterer is great. Like, even, as I mentioned, there's a lot of moments here where the letters really work. Like, I think it's page, I'm going to check the digital version because I know that's the one you're referencing. On page 6 of the digital version, like, you have this great sequence where Peter Parker just crushes the Jack in the Box, but the way that they show the Green Goblin, like very juxtaposed, you really feel something in that moment. And then you have just even off panel Peter in all red, which is an interesting choice, which really again gets your attention. And then Sal just has this great shot of him running so fast that what he was holding in his hands is still in the midair, which again is a really nice storytelling trick. And then you have the next page, you have the panel of it slowly falling to the ground, and then him finding the Spider-Man, costume on the bed, which is super creepy. And like, again, there's a lot of kind of horror aspects being played here and action. It reminded me when it kind of exploded, but it was just confetti, that one of the first times that Peter's apartment was ever blown up or trashed was also because of the Green Goblin. And it was the Harry Osborn version, which they actually did a version of that in the animated series back in the 90s. So that was a nice kind of throwback that it's not like he hasn't blown up his place before, but this time it's more psychological torture. And again, Sal does an amazing job really bringing it to life.
And even like the choices here on the same page, from the low angle shot of the falling jack-o'-lantern, everything else is low angle. The camera is low. So it makes this kind of stuffy Spider-Man on the bed seem large and voluminous and dominating. And the reader, because they're from this kind of almost worm's eye view at times, that are disempowered, right? Everything is big. Everything is kind of like intimidating, and it's constantly looking up. And so and then the characters leap down to the ground, right? Peter grabs MJ and forces her down.
That's a great shot too. Kind of, like,
yeah,
you feel that shot. You feel how much energy he's throwing into it to get her down as fast as possible.
So it's just an interesting verticality. You are both. I mean, this is like meta comics, right? This is the stuff that like we love. You're both reading from top down on the page, and like everything is pulling you down, and then the characters down into the bottom quadrants, like of the panels. As you have this almost again, like you point out, this how many things are happening in a split second, right? Because the jack o' lantern, sorry, the Jack in the Box for the first few panels is still in mid fall. Right. So, yeah, it really just feels like a master at the height of his capacities. And again, this is where some of the best comics ever come together, where you just see these minds, intersecting in really exciting ways. In ways, it's sad to say, I'm sad. It's just reality. You can't pull off necessarily when you're a hot-headed 18-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Just tell Rob Liefeld that.
In some ways, he's still a high-headed 18-year-old, isn't he?
That's true. Although he always had piss and vinegar to him. Like, he always said that. I want to flip ahead for a moment. When you get to the dinner party, so to speak, before Spider-Man is there, when it's just Green Goblin and his family, again, it's very unsettling when you see the Goblin, like, holding his son and jumping around with him and doing, like, fatherly things, right? And being like, don't let it scare you, buddy. It's just daddy. It's so deeply... what's the word? Like, concerning, because he's having a mental break. He's not even Harry right now. Like, he thinks he's able to be both, but he's the Goblin, and he's trying to like tell his son he's okay. It's so scary. And then you have the shot of like Liz isn't really sure, and you have the look of like hurt on the Goblin's face. Like, why wouldn't you want to be part of us? Like, why are you scared? Why are you worried about us? Like, it's so upsetting, but like really well done, because again, he's just tormenting his wife without even really meaning to. Like, he doesn't necessarily want to hurt her. He's just losing it, and he doesn't know how to communicate that properly. And then she isn't doing a good job of really trying to process it either. So these two people aren't really talking to each other, and there's literally a mask in the way in between them, and she's feeling trapped by, which is a little sense of being trapped because there's a brick wall behind a door. Like, it's just, there's so many interesting elements going on that JMD's bringing, but then Sal is really channeling it onto the page.
Yeah. I mean, the wine that's poured into his mouth and it's just drizzling. Is it drizzling? It seems like it's just as quickly pouring out of the corner of his mouth. He's not really there. He's not really focused. He's already out of sorts. And then, you get as the reader in between the panels with the gutters get to decide how much of that wine he drinks. Mm-hmm. You could really just, if you wanted to, draw this out in the suspense, and he puts it back down the goblet, and he pours another glass, and he puts that down too, and you can see maybe red wine or whatever it is pouring down his chin. Like, there's a movie series of kind of like, really suspenseful movie moments all put in here that you can either try to rush through, but I don't think you should. I think it's better to kind of let things sit uncomfortably, and as Liz is helpless. And you're right, again, the facial expressions on all the characters sounds incredible. There's lots of wonderful horror moments here, and they just keep continuing all throughout. And I think one of the first really horrifying ones is page 13 of the digital comic, bottom right hand last panel, where he screams, "I'll kill you," and there's just that saliva dripping between his teeth, and the eyes are extra big, and the cheekbones are it's almost like distended jaw from the cheekbones in impossible ways. That Sal is doing a great job making me terrified for Liz and her kid.
Now, on that same page, there's also a classic Sal Buscema moment, which is the punch. That really big punch where he punches Raxton across like the room. You feel every moment of that, and that's like, it's almost a parody that people have done their versions of a Sal Buscema punch, but they're all kind of like this much action, this much like raw intensity, someone just being like knocked to the other side of the room. Like, there's just something about a Sal punch, and this is a great example of one.
The upside down jaw extended, right, of the hits. There's a lot. I see Andy Cooper does this a lot. This is all, you see this in his Cap work, you see this in his X-Men work. A punch that hits the person so hard they invert, and now they are face towards the reader, and jaw is almost screaming about how hard they got hit. Yeah, so I didn't know about the Sal punch. I didn't know that this is like a trope. This is a thing that he's known for, and now I can't not see it in other artists who I would assume clearly have been inspired by him, which is kind of interesting. Very interesting.
The next page, I think it's the first time we really have Spider-Man swinging around and doing anything Spider-Man-ish. And again, there's so much narration, but I never felt that it was quite too much. Like, I felt like it was interesting because we kind of needed to understand what Peter was really going through, because up until this point, we haven't really been in his head. We've seen what he said to MJ. We've seen him looking freaked out. So it was interesting to kind of get into his head with this much. But Sal makes it work because you get some really nice, elegant shots of Spider-Man swinging. The last one, I've seen Spider-Man Blue, obviously, by Tim Sale. It looks like a Tim Sale drawing. Obviously, it's the reverse. It's Tim Sale doing Sal Buscema. But there's just something about the musculature of Spider-Man there as he's swinging away from us, and how big the spider is on the back. It just really reminded me of some of the shots that Tim Sale does, which now I realize it must have been influenced by this.
Now that you mention it, 100%. That's extremely Tim Sale. So that's really cool. Again, this is reading or watching Dune after you've already consumed all the science fiction that has been heavily inspired from Dune, and you're like, oh, that's what the last 100 years has been about. Mm-hmm. So that's also really cool to see and appreciate more about what Sal meant to a lot of people.
On page 16, we finally get the mask actually coming off of Harry, and so now we have some really great acting that Sal puts on the page, because in the sequence that follows in the next page, you see him talking, you see him having like a tear under his eye, and then instantly he's holding up the mask and you see him just looking completely twisted by anger and hatred. Like, it's just on a hair trigger, he's going back and forth from tears and genuine emotion. Like, he really sells that moment, and then instantly he's just losing it. And what's more terrifying about that entire sequence is the look on Normie's face, because it's his dad. And so he's like, yeah, this is great. We're going to all be together. Like, he doesn't get... You see Raxton looking very stoic and being like, I don't know how to get out of here. You can see him thinking, how do we get out of the situation? Liz looks hopelessly stuck and trapped. And that Normie is so happy. And what's actually interesting, just in terms of the panel layout, is that it makes it look like Liz is just looking right at Normie and seeing how happy he is. Now, maybe that's where they actually are, or maybe that's just a trick of the panel work. But it's, again, it's haunting. It's upsetting.
Well, I mean, again, to credit or compliment Sal, because you can see in the establishing, it's not really an established shot, but it's a wide shot of the table, that Liz is on the left and Normie's on the right. This is continuity, right? Like, he puts Liz later on in the left panel and Normie on the right, and she's looking towards the right where Normie should be and is. So obviously, the entire table is circular, so you can't get necessarily all the characters lined up in a line like that. It's not necessarily placing the goblin in between everybody. That's not that moment of continuity, but just, that adds credence to your interpretation, because she would be looking to the or I guess her left, our right, on that table. And so that's represented in the panel work, which I think is good. And then, like, also to your point about Harry, mask off, that is a horrifying goblin face, right? His face now is the same as a garish goblin expression. Yeah, it's not green, but it ultimately is impossibly wide, his mouth, maniacal eyes. I was also thinking, like, as this issue ends and all the examples of, like, that laughter, my big introduction to the Green Goblin outside of, the 66 cartoon, and others was some Green Goblin moments that contained laughter, but I never really understood the maniacal laugh, the goblin laugh that hurts everybody's ears. Sonic, it's not a sonic scream, but they call it like the maniacal. I think it's called the maniacal laugh. Is it?
I don't remember exactly the term, but I know what you mean. Yeah, because Phil uses it, right? Like, he has this.
Yeah, the Phil Urich, and again, he finds cachets. Phil Urich finds cachets from Harry, I think.
It's Harry's stuff.
So to see the work on the laughter, as upsetting it is, as haunting as it is, again, one of my favorite formative series, that Green Goblin series from with Phil Urich in the 90s. It's this, right? It's so pulling from this and the depictions here of Harry and the way he's laughing. So that also can help me appreciate that series better, because when characters keep coming across Phil dressed as the Goblin and he's laughing like that, and they're like, oh no, like the Goblin is back. This is messed up, and like that's wrong. And like he's like, no, I'm a good guy. And like you're flying around in a Green Goblin suit, screaming and laughing at everybody and making people's ears bleed. You're not a good guy. Like you throw pumpkin bombs and you throw like blades. Like what? Are you an idiot? Like there's nothing. It's that moment, right, that Bendis writes about. I can't remember which volume it is, where it's like that point of view of a cop on the beat talking to a rookie, and he's like, the rookie's like, oh, we got to stop this guy, and they're having a conversation like, which one is the bad guy? Like, there's a guy dressed as a devil beating the stuffing out of a guy dressed as a jester. Like, you can't tell here from these signifiers which one's the good. They're both using, right, which would be considered like villain archetypes. So this has also kind of enhanced my appreciation of the Yurk stuff that makes me want to read this story and then go back to that and situate it, right, in that context.
The next page after this one, it's interesting. The last time we got Spider-Man swinging through the city, so many word balloons, he was lost in thought. We're almost suffocated by it, right? And now you have a whole page where there's one line of dialogue. And not dialogue, it was narration, but still, you get Sal is just able to tell you the story of Spider-Man like getting there and realizing what he has to do. I love that two-shot where he doesn't move. He's just standing there thinking. And there's no extra prose, and I'm curious if JMD put extra prose in here or not, because he has said in issue 200, for example, there's this moment that he put a lot of prose on it, and then he got the art back. He's like, no, it doesn't fit. He did everything I wanted. I don't need to add words here. I'm going to take it out because I'm going to let the artwork tell the story. I'm curious if that happened here as well.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be interesting to find out, but I'm glad, regardless, that Sal was allowed to cook, as it were, that he's allowed to do what comic artists should be allowed to do, which is tell story without the need for words. I'd like to see more. I mean, I know there's the method. He's swinging around. You want to get in his head. I understand that there's an import to that, but yeah, it is nice to see Peter maybe arriving somewhere, traveling, using his powers, and then not having to be constantly in a narrative box. So yeah, that's nice. And again, it's also interesting that there's so much of this that is in narrative boxes. It goes to the next page, right? Page 19 does that as well. And yet there's also a lot of this comic that is not about Peter, right? That he's in a Green Goblin storyline, which is also interesting and not typical.
I do think that unlike the other page where it had all that dialogue, it was a lot of like feelings, but didn't actually maybe get you anywhere. It got you into his head, but that was like, but it kind of went too far, like over and over. Whereas here, it feels more exploratory. Like it's a narration telling you where you are, situating yourself. Oh, this is the old family homestead. Adding some context to what this means to Harry, why he would be here. So I do think it adds a little bit more depth. And so I didn't find that I bumped against the words here. They felt more natural, which they hadn't before. You have this crazy, Green Goblin, I guess, on a it's almost like another Jack in the Box type thing with a machine gun.
Yeah.
So bizarre.
Yeah.
But like that's comics, right? Like, let's have fun.
Yeah, I don't know what the physics are here, but the face, again, like the swirly pupils,
oh yeah,
really unsettling. Great Sal work.
And then when Spider-Man finally gets to the family dinner, like that first shot, you can see that it's, again, Harry just screaming and yelling, don't you have any decency? And then almost immediately he like calms down and he actually looks more like his dad. And he looks more like calm. And that's almost more frightening when he seems more in control. But it's interesting, like, and then the page following, you have probably one of the most horrific Harry Osborn faces when his eyes are completely inset, but it's still like it's still Harry. But he's completely transformed. And they kind of did a version of this on the 90s animated series when Harry went a little bit crazy. They kind of did the same thing with the eyes darkening and it kind of looking like unwell. And I love here, I don't know, it's more, I think, visual on the digital version, but you have the green reflected on his face. Like, I don't know where that comes from, or if I guess that was just a choice of the colorist to show that he's like really just the Goblin all the time now. But it's really haunting. It's less visible in the printed version, in the omnibus that I have, but in the digital version, it really picks up the green.
Yeah, for me, because there's a lot of yellow on this page, it looks a little more yellowy, but as you were talking, I'm like, is that like greeny? And then you were like, oh no, it's kind of, I got a green to it. So I don't know. I would love to see if this has got a different effect, maybe in the original. I would assume there's a newsprint copy of this, although based on the anniversary edition, I don't know if this was a glossy issue, but That is always of interest to me, to see how they plan to put things on paper that the people, the newsstands would get, or the comic stores would get, versus how it might look kind of, whatever, on the best possible paper. Same kind of thing in like early video games with like NES games, that like people talk about the original sprite for Link has two. It seems like he has two sets of eyes. Of course, he doesn't. But there's like a brown and then there's a green dot. At least in the pixels, brown dot, green dot, and it kind of looks really funky when maybe you blow it up and make it very sharp. But the effect apparently is it's supposed to be eyebrows, right? But you don't get that kind of blended look of like pupils and eyebrows if it was on an old CRT television. Yeah. So I would be interested to see if this comes across even more greeny on the original page.
I do like the image of Spider-Man eating with his mask just rolled up enough. Like, there's just something really about that I really like. But yeah, the whole sequence is great. And then finally, like, Molten Man can't take it anymore and like tries to attack him again, even though he was recently got his butt kicked earlier. Like, I like that. And again, more of the Goblin just going on him. Like, I think let me just see which page this is on the digital version. Page 24, the last panel is horrific. Like, that's just like, this guy's just wailing on this guy. And to be honest, this is the first indication, this issue, that something isn't right because Harry's got powers. Like, I think this is the first time we realize that he's actually got super strength, because I believe he never had it before this. He was always just a guy. I think this is the first time he actually exhibits powers, and I think we even see it in Peter being like, "Oh, he shouldn't be able to do this. He doesn't have the power." At least he never did before. So, again, they're not outright telling us, but they're telling us. Something's different.
Good visual storytelling then, right? Like, you could figure it out before, considering how hard he's hit people before. But, interesting. This is not speed lines. This is, I guess, whatever. I don't know what these lines would be called. These are power lines. I don't know. But just the way that the onomatopoeia, the lettering of crack, and then the whole page is like a splintered, shattered glass. It does really evoke this feeling of like Raxton is getting shredded. And I love a gauntlet blaster. Love the fingertip blasters. Love it when Doom does it. Love it when the goblins do it. It is, I don't know, there's something just about, you can splay your fingers out in any direction. You can really just kind of hit all sorts of things that you maybe didn't even intend to hit. It's just very chaotic feeling. And it's interesting they don't use it as much. Is it only ever in one hand? They don't tend to do a lot of double blasts, but
not often. But sometimes it's interesting. The next page where you see more of the finger blasting on doesn't sound right, on page 25 of the digital version. There's a great shot of Goblins firing at Spider-Man and saying, "I don't need any help," as he's pulling on his crutch, as he's pulling on the mask. I love that kind of. I don't know if that's subtext or metatext going on there, that he's saying he doesn't need any help, but he's literally pulling on the mask to do it. And I feel like he feels stronger in the mask. And that's the feeling I get in here. And so I don't know if you felt that way when you read that panel.
I mean, I didn't think of that at the time. It is a good point that, it's interesting you use it as like the referral to, what is the term in critical disability studies? Narrative prosthesis, this idea that disability carries the narrative, and in this case, this is kind of his support, it's
his crutch,
his true face, right? That's the classic kind of example. Oh no, you took my face. But what is also, of course, important is he's no more or less horrific with the mask on. In some ways, he's less horrific, right? Because even though, again, Sal's doing an incredible job with these eyes and that maw, that sharpened look, those teeth. He's still, there's almost no point, there's no difference, right? So this is just a Norman thing where he has to, I guess, feel behind the mask. It protects him, it supports him, it helps him.
Page 26, again, the whole kind of struggle between two different, it's interesting, it's almost like a study in divorce, even though in theory they were happy, and then he had a psychotic break, but he's not seeing it that way. So like when he's says to Normie, like, "Do you think Daddy's crazy?" And then putting this kid in the middle of having to choose this, looking at his mom crying, looking at his dad and being like, "I don't think you're crazy, Daddy. I love you." He's like, "That's my boy. After all, what does your stupid mother know? She's not really an Osborn either. She doesn't have Osborn blood in her veins. And then she's not one of us." And it's just horrific and really heart-wrenching. Like, this woman has supported this guy who had difficulties throughout, many years, and he had been better, much better for like a while, but he obviously had a lot of repressed issues with his childhood and what being the Green Goblin was, and knowing what his father was and what his father had done to him. And then this is just heart-wrenching.
And to add on I should add on first before I talk about the other thing I was thinking about. This is one of the ways I think that really good comics, the fantasy stuff, the science fiction stuff, the Marvel stuff, takes real world stuff, right? Because it's allegorical. An abusive, though troubled parent trying to make the children choose. And poor Liz, I mean, I wish she had more than this, right? Like, so much of her in these years is around her being abused, or is about her crying and trying the best to support her kid. But in this moment, before there's even more further years of this almost becoming like the totality of her character, this is gut wrenching, and I really want justice for her. So when Harry does get his comeuppance, I am right. This is beyond the pale. The way that he uses his son. I was also thinking, just in terms of like visual elements, there's a lot that John Romita Jr. takes in for his rendition of Normie eventually. Just this very kind of rounded, and there's other examples earlier on in the issue of just this kind of almost circular face that Romita Jr. Goes really heavy on. It seems like he is directly as well inspired by this. And again, I think that the panel work in this issue is great. Maybe I'm misspeaking. Maybe I'm not being generous to call this a guffaw, but technically you're supposed to read top left, right to bottom, and Sal has to tell you with an arrow in panel 2. Actually, I don't want you to go top down. I want you to go stay at the top and then go right. This is a small guideline because his panel work might not be perfectly clear here, but it's interesting considering so much of this. There's no need for these arrows anywhere else. I thought that was kind of interesting. Maybe even an afterthought. I don't really know. Anyway, but
that's a good point.
It's still haunting.
Yeah. I'm going to flip. I mean, you have some issues, sort of pages of the glider hitting Spider-Man and then trying to fight Spider-Man. I want to go back to another kind of classic punch moment on page 29 where you have I love the way that this punch is done because you have Spider-Man, but Green Goblin's already past him and he's been knocked into the BAM. And I just think there's so much visual storytelling just in that moment of just how hard he hit him, the emotion of the moment, and I just love that particular shot.
I mean, I think it might be culminating for you, I suppose, the biggest punch, because really, in some ways, you could do your own critique of superhero comics is like, isn't it just about who does the biggest punch? Which, again, hopefully is only useful in metaphor, in actuality, not always that interesting. But yeah, like I said, now that I know that this is a Sal thing, I keep looking for it. Again, back a page, even in page 28, Peter gets hit hard once, then even harder with a smacow, and then the flailing hand, and again, the face towards the camera. But I like a good Sazak. I love that four-fingered blast into Peter's gut as well. That's its own kind of, it's a variety. It's not a punch. It's still, let's call it a Sal smash. But there's some variety there in the weapons that he's using. But yeah, you're right about that BAM on page 29. Again, those lines that he draws, emanating, the energy emanating out, and these stark colors of the blue, and then the last panel on the same page of all pink, where the energy, the kinetic energy that's being released there and spread out everywhere. Kathoom, right? The sides of the onomatopoeia filling the panels. Really, it's the Titans, right? It's the Battle of the Titans.
Well, even on the next page, it's one of those things where there's a lot of white space, but I don't really think about it because it's just like you're so focused on the images between these two guys. Literally, everything else falls from view. Like it's just this is these two guys just going at it, and they do this a lot actually during when Buscema's doing the art. I love the idea. I don't know what it is about the visual of Green Goblin choking out Spider-Man. Like, there's just something about how he uses the costume and the mask of Spider-Man in that moment. Like, you feel that he can't breathe. Yet, it's just a mask with two eye holes. Like, how do I feel that from the art? But you do anyway.
guess when you draw enough Spider-Man too, right? That not only is there a need to express, to emote, but did you just you figure out the angles that work, and they do. It's more than just I'm hurting. There's absolutely I can't breathe. And technically, any other time when his mask is drawn over his face, you're like, well, he may have trouble breathing with that mask. But I feel like he cannot breathe through this mask in these shots, and that's quite a magic trick that Sal's doing.
Yeah. Another big punch, page 32, because we're not done with big punches.
There it is. That's the one.
It's a big one.
Yep. And that's what we're here for.
What I like about it is the follow-up to it, that you have another shot using some of the same iconography like around it in terms of those lines we were mentioning, as he literally gets pushed backwards, and you don't actually see him hit the wall. The next panel is him below the spot where he smashed the wall with his body, and just looking broken. And there's just, I actually find that is one of my favorite kind of things he does, is showing how broken Green Goblin is on the ground. Like, just, you feel that moment. You almost, again, you didn't even need to see him hit that thing. You just need to see the effect of what his body had on it, and just him looking broken at the bottom. And then the next panel, like on the next page, is just him all webbed up. And again, you have these great shots of Norman looking really pissed at Spider-Man, and again, seeding in the fact that like he's going to want to kill Spider-Man 2, which definitely leads into MC2 stuff with the origin of Spider-Girl is all about Normie Osborn finally being ready to take on the Goblin legacy and attack Peter. And Peter's not Spider-Man anymore, so May becomes Spider-Girl to stop him. So definitely seeds that element. And then the page where they have the Green Goblin being brought to prison, I just love that image where he's like, I'm going to tell the world, and then you flip the page, but not just yet, and him just losing it, screaming, laughing, right? Like almost like a Joker kind of moment, as they just send him away, and you just have Spider-Man just kind of standing there alone as the car pulls off. And this is a moment that we've seen before. This is a moment that I believe was a Ron Friends moment originally, around, I think, issue Amazing Spider-Man 261. They definitely use this again in 200, but that time it's not Harry being brought away to the paddy wagon, it's him being brought to the morgue, because now he's dead. But they use the exact same framing. And that one, at least we know, is a direct pull from Buscema himself, because he does it here and he revisits it 11 issues later.
And this is that moment I was speaking before. I forgot the alliteration. That was my bad. It's the lunatic laugh.
Yes, that's
that Yorick later will get, and this just feels very much like that, like really big, ha 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 onomatopoeia, and then the eyes getting bugged out and louder, and that in the depictions, the drawings of the teeth, the spittle, really just made me kind of think of that they're drawing from that McDaniel might be drawing from Sal for the lunatic laugh. So that feeling of continuity to one of my favorite comics. It makes this seem more important and more special for me. So incredible. I agree with you on these points as well. I just wanted to add my thoughts on page 32 with that same panel 3, that the world is not drawn. It's all energy and cracking and smacking. And then you get to see the world, right? You get to see what impact they've had on the world. And again, that moment to let his body be at rest. I agree. It's very important for pacing. And so this is really good Spider-Man stuff. I love it.
It's really good. Yeah, I mean, again, I've told you before, but you should read The Child Within. It's really emotive, and it leads to here, so it does kind of set the stage. And again, I mean, I'm sure you've read issue 200 where he dies, but I mean, that's tremendous as well. What's crazy about that is that like the next issue is like part 3 of Maximum Carnage. Like they just go right from like this big emotional, touch point. Yeah. They have the conclusion at that point of 2 years of storytelling, because that's how long I think JMD had been on the book telling this, this descent of Harry Osborn into madness that culminates in his death, and then boom, Maximum Carnage. Like it's basically a bunch of action figures fighting each other. So it's so crazy, the tonal shift between the two.
That seems like a crazy whiplash. It's hard to imagine that even happens.
Right? And
it doesn't seem like the same book.
And the Clone Saga is not long after. Like, again, the Clone Saga starts spectacular-wise with issue 217. We're only at 189 here, so we're only 28 issues away from Ben Reilly coming on the scene. When Harry dies, that's 200. That's only a year and a half before the Clone Saga. So you're getting closer and closer to something that will fundamentally shift and upend Spider-Man for a while.
you can really see these abrupt changes, right? These jumps when you have people will comment and say, I love Spider-Man until, and that would definitely be an until. Like, that would be a completely different, you're like buying this book and then you pick up the next issue and you're just like, what? So for some people, it was like when Claremont leaves X-Men. For other people, it's just like AOA maybe. They're just like, this is a bridge too far for me. What does my X-Men become? But that's wild to think of how a Spider-Man goes from storytelling and family drama to toys smashing against each other.
But I guess in some ways that's, it's good to have a different taste, a different feel. Like, it's interesting if you do read the Child Within. This isn't really a spoiler, but in the last issue of it, or actually no, there's the Child Within. I think there's 6 parts, and then there's an Aftermath issue. The end of the Aftermath issue, you turn the corner and you have the fabulous Frogman, and he's like, "Hiya, Spidey," and you're like, "What is happening?" But you've just had 7 issues of extremely dense psychological drama, and you're dealing with child abuse, and you're dealing with mental health, and you turn the page and you have Frogman, because sometimes you need to break up the crazy and not the crazy. You have to break up the seriousness with some levity, and that's something JMD loved to do. So the next issue after this, again, these 7 issues that are really intense, you have Frogman.
Well, the Frogman doesn't matter, father, son. You know what? You and your son one day. That would be a good Halloween costume.
Oh, God. I can't even imagine.
You should do it. You got to do it. He would be down for it. He'd be totally down for it.
I don't know if my wife would be down for us being the 2 frogmen, but...
You could be a frog family, and then you get Kermit in there if you want. You could do a whole bunch of frogs. It'd be great.
So, anyway, okay. Well, thank you so much for coming back. I'm glad that we had it felt like you had a much better experience with Sal this time around.
I'm not anti-Sal. Not like you're anti-Byrne.
No, but yeah, right. But this was us looking at more of his celebrated work and the stuff that maybe he had more time on and more emotion for, because he had runs on these books. He had more invested, as opposed to the others where he was coming on and doing an arc, or coming on and starting his career, that type of thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hope we have done him justice. He deserves to be celebrated, and I hope no one thinks for a second that we don't have that appreciation for his incredible talent.
So I feel like next time we have to go back to John Byrne and give him his flowers, because apparently we have impugned the gods of John Byrne, and we need to talk about stuff that's more celebrated.
Okay. Certainly, everybody, you all know that he's amazing, and we can just do an episode where we just have nothing else to say. We're like, wow, this is really amazing, and boy, this is really detailed. Look at the proportions on this. I don't know if we can get a full hour out of that, but we'll do our best.
I think we could, but, it's interesting. I mean, I think if we do it, we should do the an issue of Man of Steel, because he wrote it and drew it, and he kind of revitalized and changed Superman moving forward for the 80s, right? If we do... an issue of Fantastic Four. Again, he wrote and drew a lot of that stuff. So, it's pure Byrne in a good way.
Paul would be Paul. Does he have a lot of experience with Byrne? I feel like it'd be nice to...
I feel like he has no experience with Byrne.
I think it would be good.
I don't know if we can get him to do it. Well, if we haven't come back, we have other things we have to delve into. We have a laundry list.
All right. Well, we'll see what we can do.
Usually, yeah. Although he's never been on one of these episodes. That being said, he does Book of the Months. He's never done a creator spotlight. So maybe we could have him come on.
We just have to trick him. We just have to lie to him and trick him, and that'll get him.
That's so terrible.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's all good. He needs to be lied to sometimes.
Well, that's fair. Well, again, to you, dear listener, we're not going to lie to you. We had a great time talking about Sal Buscema today. Thanks for listening to this episode. You can email us at comicshenanigans@gmail.com. Rate this show on Apple Podcasts. Listen to us on Apple Podcasts, and also listen to us on Spotify. Next week's episode, I believe, if I'm correct on the schedule, is going to be Ron Friends coming back for his 19th appearance. We're so close to 20. And then upcoming episodes in the next month and a half to 2 months, we'll have Alex Segura on. Unfortunately, that got rescheduled to the end of April, so that'll probably be coming out in May. We have Chuck Gower coming back on the show. He has a new book that's sure to be controversial to those who are apostles of Stan Lee, which is all about the creation of Spider-Man and how much Stan Lee may or may not have had to do with it at certain moments, and how much of it was more Ditko. So we'll be talking about that. And then... not sure who else is coming back on the show, but we're going to have some returning guests soon. We're just working on scheduling, so thanks again for listening. And Nate, as always, thank you for being part of the Creator Spotlights.
Good to be here. See you later.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.